This program is proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.
Good evening, viewers. I'm Malcolm Wyra, and welcome to another episode of Infocus. In this session, we are joined by the President of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, Dr. Peter Maynard KC. Dr. Maynard, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Firstly, Dr. Maynard, can you tell us a little bit about the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, as well as its missions and its core objectives?
Let me first say a word of gratitude to the Chief Justice and the Deputy Chief Justice and the judges for inviting me to the opening of the legal year. And it's such an amazing country, beautiful country. The people are very, very friendly here. And so I'm very pleased to be here. The Commonwealth Lawyers Association consists of 56 jurisdictions around the world, about a third of the world's population. And the core objectives of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association are to uphold human rights, access to justice, the rule of law, and also the independence of judges and lawyers. And so it has many opportunities for networking of lawyers and judges. We had, for example, we will have a conference in Malta in 2025, a Commonwealth Law Conference, and also one coming up in Borneo, and another one hopefully in the Bahamas, my country, from May the 30th to June the 1st. And so it's meant to assist in achieving those core objectives: rule of law, access to justice, human rights.
How does the Commonwealth Lawyers Association implement its objectives?
In many ways. For example, we're strong advocates, as I said, of independence of lawyers and judges. And we issue statements. For example, at Kiribati, Justice David Lamburn, we've issued 2 statements there. And in other situations around the world, we issue a statement advocating for human rights, access to justice, rule of law. We also contribute in terms of developing rules and guidelines. Historically, one of the major achievements has been the principles governing the relationship between the different branches of government. We have also contributed at various meetings of the Commonwealth and other organizations. We also have committees. We have corporate and commercial. We have climate justice. We also have family law, law tech and ethics. We also have public and administrative law. And we also have an online training institute, an e-library, which is contributed to, thankfully, to a large extent by the Judiciary of Papua New Guinea, making their platform available. Papua New Guinea has a lot to offer the entire world, and we try to make training available. Lawyers, as I mentioned yesterday, become judges, and so they need to be very well trained, and we are contributing to that in a very meaningful way.
Can you, in as much as layman's terms, explain how the Commonwealth legal system differs from other legal systems around the world?
The Commonwealth system is based on the common law. The common law as opposed to civil law. Civil law countries are those from who apply the Napoleonic Code, for example, such as France and others. So the common law system is different from the civil law system. And one of the major features is that it is trial-based, court-based. There are cases which one builds the law. One applies, for example, precedents from previous cases for consistency. And so common law turns out to be a very adaptable system of law. For example, nowadays we talk about AI. And the common law, through the trial cases and so on, is able to develop principles regarding AI, whereas perhaps other systems may be more rigid. And so it's one of the big values of the Commonwealth is that we are lawyers practicing common law by and large, although I should say the difference between the two systems becoming less and less. They're coming closer and closer together.
What has been your impression of the PNG legal system so far?
The PNG legal system, as far as I can ascertain, I'm learning more every day, is common law based by and large. All of us across particularly the global south, we've had different colonial experiences, and some of them are quite similar actually. Many different colonial powers, Britain among them. And so the PNG legal system appears to be a very strong system. The country is very diverse. It's very diverse, and begin to appreciate the customary law here. A little more of that. But it is this morning I had a tour of the new court complex, and it's really phenomenal. The complex here, very impressive, very well equipped, ultra modern, and that goes hand in hand with the system, the legal system, and so it seems to be rather strong here in PNG. As far as I can tell, the words of the Chief Justice yesterday resonate very strongly. He speaks very plainly about what needs to be done to uphold the rule of law, and I'm hoping that to get to know even more and more about the PNG.
Dr. Maynard, thank you. We now go for a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions. Welcome back. You're watching In Focus. Now, Dr. Maynard, for PNG, like many other Commonwealth countries who have their unique indigenous cultures and traditions, do you feel that the Commonwealth legal systems around the world, do they adequately recognize and incorporate them into their respective laws?
As I mentioned earlier, the common law system is quite adaptable. And so we've seen different adaptations in various jurisdictions. And so while I'm learning more about the system, it seems to me that indeed the common law can be adaptable enough to accommodate the traditional systems.
You mentioned earlier the emergence of artificial intelligence. Given the drastic transformation in technology, with the most notable example being the emergence of artificial intelligence, which is threatening jobs and professions that are traditionally done by humans. From your perspective, to what extent will the practice of law be affected by artificial intelligence?
I just attended a month ago the opening of a Legally in Hong Kong, where I spoke on that very topic. And it turns out that there is very useful research going on in places such as Hong Kong, Singapore, the European Union, and I'm hoping that over the next few months that the Commonwealth Lawyers Association will develop a declaration on AI to deal with this very specific point. Even though we have AI, one of the principles we espouse is that there still be a human element, a human involved in the process at all times. That's one of the many principles which will be emerging. And so there will be perhaps a different role for humans, but nevertheless roles. And so I think perhaps, certainly at the present time, the idea of completely eliminating the role of men and women, that's probably maybe overstated. The role may be different, but nevertheless, there will be a role. I remember when I began to learn about computer systems and how computers are programmed and computer coding, there is the expression garbage in, garbage out. How a system responds depends a lot on what you put into it. The AI takes us to a different level because it begins to operate on its own to some extent. But nevertheless, the point remains that we need to be careful in how we we develop these systems, we should be careful that there's a human element at all times. And in terms of the judiciary itself, it can have a very positive effect in case management. It's also used to some extent in limited cases. For example, in Malaysia, which I also visited, they have a number of discrete offenses which are determined by AI. And so it can be quite valuable, but it's a tool, like anything else. It is not necessarily negative or positive. One has to make sure, like a tool, that it's used in constructive and positive ways.
Do you feel that law schools within universities should adjust the delivery of law education and training?
The law schools, and I happen to be the former head of a law department, of the University of Bahamas. Training has gone through an adjustment. During COVID, for example, we found that we were using Zoom and virtual learning a lot more. That tends to be rather negative, in my opinion. I found that some lecturers, the students, were behind let's say a Zoom screen, no camera on, and so we found students driving cars during class, or in the supermarket shopping, or in the closet at work trying to join, or something else. And so by and large, we've gone through an involuntary adaptation just because of COVID. I think virtual learning is here to stay to a significant extent. However, in-person learning, it seems to be more effective in my estimation. That's my opinion, certainly. We need virtual tools, but the entire education should not be virtual. The in-person element is also a very important part of it. So we have the adjustment. We also have the element of AI and what impact that has. The application of AI in learning is also very important. It's important to acknowledge whose work product it is. Is it AI's work product, or is it your work product as a student? And the student, as a matter of integrity and honesty, should state whether he or she has produced a paper, for example, by use of AI. And so, yes, we are seeing a development, but we have to make sure to direct it in positive ways. And I doubt that it will completely replace, at the present time, an in-person contact between lecturer and the students.
What is the official position of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, especially in regards to climate change legislation and litigation, given that a lot of the Commonwealth countries have communities who are greatly affected by the impacts of climate change?
Climate change concerns the CLA very, very much. Indeed, we have the Borneo Law Conference, the Borneo Rainforest Law Conference coming up, dealing with climate change. We also have a climate change committee of the CLA, which deals with the issues. I myself am from a country, the Bahamas, where land is disappearing, much as the Nissan Islands, I understand from the news, are disappearing because of climate change. And so we are very much engaged in the process of taking meaningful steps regarding climate change. And so we have we monitor the ongoing COP meetings, for example, to see how effective they can be. And we're coming together for representations regarding the ICJ to the International Court of Justice, an application I believe initiated by Vanuatu, but other countries of the Commonwealth are assisting in that connection. And in other fora, there are similar actions. We are monitoring also, for example, the case regarding the Torres Islanders against Australia. And so we're talking about the survival of the planet. And that's a very important topic for us, a high priority, as reflected in our committee structure and as reflected in the work we do on an ongoing basis.
Do you feel that Commonwealth countries' legal systems provide a clarity in terms of the legislations that govern climate change?
I think the government, the legislation has to change. It has to evolve. We've seen, for example, legislation setting up limitations and parameters. We've seen legislation on carbon credits. being developed. And so we are encouraging the development of legislation, making sure that legislation keeps pace with this very critical issue. And we're hoping, for example, that there will be more accelerated developments. There is now a fund agreed at the last COP to assist developing countries. That's a major breakthrough. But still, we need to see more rapid and more effective changes. We're now at COP, the next one will be COP 29, I believe. 29 sessions. It's a rather very, very slow pace. We'd like to see it accelerated. We know that we are not hitting the targets we need to hit in terms of controlling emissions. And so it's a matter where we need to redouble our efforts, and we try to do that within the context of the CLA, redoubling our efforts to avert the climate crisis.
Thank you, Dr. Maynard. We'll now go for a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions. Welcome back. You're watching Infocus. Now, Dr. Maynard, the environment, social and governance, or ESG agenda, has come to prominence in the current business and economic environment and landscape. How is the Commonwealth Lawyers Association adopting to this change?
Very many of the lawyers in the Commonwealth Lawyers Association are engaged in ESG audits and so on. It's a key topic for us. By the way, I should point out that the website, commonwealthlawyers.com, has a lot of information on topics such as ESG. There is the Commonwealth Lawyer, which has been published since the 1980s, which is produced 3-4 times a year journal. And I encourage the public, particularly those interested in law issues and ESG, to do take a look at the website, commonwealthlawyers.com, because it's really a treasury of information, not just for the public, but once you've joined the CLA, and it's very inexpensive to join, you get access to the archives of information on ESG. ESG is a very, very important phenomenon. It's each of the factors, environmental, social, and governance issues, need to be taken into account. And indeed, the lawyers who would advise corporations, indeed those who take action against corporations, look at the performance of firms and corporations within the context of ESG. And so it's a relatively new idea. However, elements of it have been around for a while. A lot of my work, for example, has been related to the alleviation of poverty. And indeed, it's no accident that Sustainable Development Goal 1 is the elimination of poverty. And indeed, even commercial entities such as corporations can have an impact on that, the environmental, social side of it, as well as governance. And so this is a key area for the CLA. I mentioned the Corporate and Commercial Committee directly, and indeed it points out that even companies have a role to play in improving our environment, social circumstances, as well as our governance.
What are some of the common issues or challenges identified by CLA that confronts Commonwealth countries currently?
Commonwealth Law Conference is probably the best conference that one can attend on law subjects, covering the full spectrum of topics. For example, in connection with the Borneo conference, we're dealing with environmental issues. ESG will be an element there as well. The World Justice Project will be talking about evaluating the application of the rule of law. Whether you're successful at something, you should be able to measure it. And we're talking about actually using measurements to see how successful people are at implementing the rule of law. In the context of the Bahamas conference, which is upcoming, issues such as the peaceful settlement of disputes. We find that many of our young people do not know how to settle disputes peacefully. And many of our older people don't know as well. And so one has to look into things such as peer mediation for our schools, and that, as well as the commercial side of it, the application of arbitration and mediation to commercial disputes. And if one is good at resolving commercial disputes, one is more likely to attract investment, and one is more likely, therefore, to grow the economy, and more than to alleviate poverty. And so, as reflected in the topics of our committees, the main elements are, firstly, advocacy to support rule of law, access to justice, human rights. But we have committees dealing with human rights on an ongoing basis, a whole spectrum of issues, climate justice, the whole spectrum of issues, corporate and commercial issues, law tech, AI, and so on, family law. Family law, domestic violence is an issue around the world. We want to share experiences, network to see what can be done to improve challenges in various places in those areas. There are also areas such as child abduction and family law. So family law is a very important element for us in terms of our issues. And so we want to start with those issues which can branch out into other smaller, other segments, some of them quite large actually. One of my areas is anti-corruption. I'm an anti-corruption lawyer. I try to recover assets on behalf of victims of fraud. And that's included within our Public and Administrative Law Committee. That's a very important area. I gather there have been some developments here in PNG on that subject as well. And so I encourage lawyers in that area to join us within the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, because you'll find all of these issues, pressing issues, are within the scope of our work. And we make many of our sessions open to the public. You don't have to necessarily be a lawyer to follow the work. The conference in the Bahamas, for example, is open to the public. And Borneo, I think, is also open to those who are interested in environmental law. And so you'll find that pressing issues bubble to the top at the CLA, and we make an impact, positive impact on them.
The CLA has recently signed a partnership with the World Justice Program. Can you tell us what this partnership entails?
Yes, we've done, as I mentioned earlier, we've done, we have a stronger relationship. We've done an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with the World Justice Project, and we are helping them to collect data on areas such as these islands of the Pacific, on rule of law. And so they will be participating in Borneo. In fact, I will be chairing a session in Borneo with them on their findings. And so their interest in data collection and understanding rule of law fits in very nicely with our objective to uphold the rule of law. You don't really know how successful you are at something unless you can measure it. And they suggest various ways of measuring the rule of law.
Finally, do you have any concluding remarks you'd like to make?
I'd like to say thank you to the people of PNG for such a warm welcome, to the judiciary and to the Law Society for such a warm welcome. It's an amazing country. I've only seen really the Port Moresby area by and large. I'm hoping to come back again to experience more of it. I'd like to mention that the challenges that the PNG is going through are also challenges of so many other countries around the Commonwealth. And if we work together, we can resolve those challenges. What may be a very serious challenge within the context of PNG might be something which is very well dealt with in another jurisdiction, and vice versa. Something may be a challenge for another jurisdiction, maybe, as we're finding, with, for example, the training platforms which the PNG Judiciary has made available to us. that kind of experience can help us all grow, can help us all contribute to building a better world.
Dr. Peter Maynard, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, viewers, that ends this episode of Infocus. Do join us again next week, Monday, for another episode of Infocus. Till then, bye for now.
This program was proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.